All right, thanks, Kyle. I want to introduce our three panelists today. First, I'm going to introduce Chris Bramwell. Chris is the Chief Privacy Officer for the state of Utah, so brings a lot of good regulatory experience and wisdom to the panel. Next up, I'd like to introduce Heather Allen. Heather is a certified information privacy professional, and pretty much every other information privacy acronym that you can imagine is under her belt for CHG, which is a local healthcare company. So deep into privacy, very much great experience. And then Tyson Woodruff, who works for Slalom Consulting, doing privacy consulting. So we handpicked these panel members because they represent a really broad perspective across privacy and compliance, regulatory, in the weeds, deep technical experience, and consulting, which means lots of exposure to lots of different companies. So I think we should each just take a minute and introduce ourselves, if you wouldn't mind. Chris, do you want to start?
I'm Chris Bramwell, Chief Privacy Officer for the state of Utah, the inaugural CPO. My position's fairly brand new. The title, I've been in it for 2 years. The title changed last session because the legislature recognized calling the head of privacy government operations privacy officer is too big and doesn't mean anything. So they changed it to CPO. But my main job with the state right now is actually to work on legislation. We're making legislative recommendations and actually drafting legislation with my team in the legislature to define what does privacy mean for government. One of the first things we identified is private companies that we work with. You have a lot of consumer privacy laws. Things are coming about, but nobody's saying, well, what is the government doing? Everybody thinks government has privacy laws in place. Well, surprise, surprise, Utah, I think, is going to be the first one to have a Government Entity Privacy Act. And my vision, what we're trying to do in Utah is make privacy a feature of Utah, where if you engage with the government, you know that your privacy is going to be protected, and people will choose to live here because the government will leave them alone. But more importantly, on the private company side, have those clear rules and regulations so everybody knows, what do I have to do so we can have a free market, so companies can engage with individuals and use the data, and that individuals have the option of choice and they know how to engage with companies. And we truly believe in Utah that if we align those for both private sector and public, that privacy will be a feature, and people will choose to live here, companies will go here or come and establish themselves here and have employees here because privacy is going to be that important. It's truly the societal issue of our time.
Thanks, Chris. Next up, Heather.
I'm Heather Allen. I am the privacy officer for CHG Healthcare. We do locum tenens, staffing for doctors and nurses, and do all of that fun things. My background is healthcare. I was part of Intermountain Healthcare's privacy office, and then part of the 1-800-CONTACTS privacy team. So lots of privacy things and all the enjoyable exams that give test anxiety for people. That would be me, that take forever to study and feel confident that you can do. So, but this year became a fellow in private information privacy, which was really cool. So yeah, I'm very passionate about the privacy realm, and I love that I get to partner with my security teams and my web teams and all the analytics. So when I break things, they know to call me, right, Nick? And so, yeah, we tend to break things sometimes because we are trying to be compliant, and then we have really cool people that know how to fix it. So thanks.
All right, Tyson.
Morning. My name is Tyson Woodruff, with Senior Director at Slalom Consulting here in Salt Lake City. Previously, and I just started about 6 weeks ago here in Salt Lake City for the reason that Dave was talking about and that Chris was talking about, which is I feel like Utah is going to be at the forefront of a business and creating a business environment that will draw companies in and really establish themselves here. So prior to joining Slalom here, I was with PwC as a managing director in their cybersecurity practice. But in a former life, I was an FBI counterintelligence agent and then CIA operations officer. And my job was to go out and first stop people from stealing secrets from U.S. companies, and then two, go out and steal secrets from other companies around the world. And so So this idea of data privacy, I learned years and years and years ago, before it was even a popular topic, when I would go out and work with all sorts of different companies, helping them to understand what people were trying to steal, how they were stealing it, and then stop them from doing it. And it's become exponentially more difficult to protect data and information nowadays, and so exponentially easier for companies, for nefarious actors, for nation state actors to come in and steal information that they can then leverage against companies or to their benefit. So this has been a topic that I've been involved with, that I've loved for years now.
All right, thanks so much, panel. So the way this is going to work is we have curated a set of questions, and we've carefully chosen these questions that we think will be the most relevant to you in your roles. And we do have quite a diverse set of people here from diverse responsibilities that they take care of at their companies. And so we all have talked about these questions, just to be clear. This is not off the cuff. So there's been some preparation here. You're not just getting random answers. And I want to start with the most obvious and broad question, which is, what is data privacy? And this can mean different things to different people. Those of you who work in this field know that people come to this with different context, different connotation. So I just want to throw out some terms here, and then I'm going to ask each panelist for their perspective on this question. So first of all, when we say data, what do we mean? What data are we talking about that needs to be private? What is the right to be forgotten? How does that relate to privacy? What is DSAR, the data subject access request? Do we need to care about that? What is do not track, do not sell, do not sell, do not share? What is that? What is personally identifying information? What is personal information? What is aggregate data? What is pseudonymization? What is anonymization? There's all these different things that go into it. I'd like to ask each panelist to take a few minutes and say, what is data privacy for what you do, and what do we need to know about data privacy? Heather, can we start with you since you have the mic?
No. So data privacy to me is, as a consumer, it's who am I sharing my data with? What are they doing with it? And what rights do I have as a consumer to the use of my data, right? Like, I think about the driver's license division who likes to sell our information to the electoral people, right? And we get all these ads because I'm sorry, Chris. I'm getting spammed by text messages. I don't know about you guys, but are you? And it's super frustrating because I can't opt out. But I also know that I give my information to all these websites that then send me tons of spam. But I'm like, ooh, that's a deal that I want, right? And so it's the leverage of data for the benefit. So is there a cost-benefit analysis there that goes to the use of my data as a consumer? For a company perspective, mine is all about, what data are we collecting? Why are we collecting it? What are we going to do with it? Do we need it? And how are we going to protect it? And then going to DSARs and all of that, yes, it's important because that's how the consumer decides if they want to know what we have, where we got it, how we're using it, deleting it, all of those things, and being able to appropriately abide by the request of the consumer. Because in reality, as companies, we're like, this is our data. Like, we have this data, we buy the data, we collect the data, we spend a ton of money and time to get this data. But the reality is it's not our data, it's the data of the person. And so I think a lot of times we in companies forget the personal aspect of privacy and of the data itself, that it really is a person's information. And so what are we doing with that to make sure that we're doing the right thing for that person? And if what we're doing is the right thing for the person, they should agree with that. If they don't, then they can have the right to delete, have the right to be forgotten, all of those things. And so I deal every single day with consumer rights, deletion, do not contact, all of the things, right? And hearing different stories and doing different initiatives, trying to make sure that we're doing the right thing with the data all day, every day. And when new initiatives happen, it's like, let me know so that I can help you make sure that we're doing it appropriately and that we're ensuring that we're communicating and giving proper notice to the consumer that we're changing a few things about how we're using the data so that they can then agree to that as well. So it's all about rights. So it's a double-edged coin of the same coin, right? Because I'm a person and I want to use other people's data too. Well, I don't, but the company I represent do.
Chris, could I get your take on this with a governance angle for legislation, which is that as a business, we engage in these data privacy questions, and automatically we are acting within jurisdictions. And those jurisdictions vary from industry to industry, from state to state, from nation to nation. And they also vary depending on if I'm engaging with a municipality, with a consumer. Talk to us a little bit about that landscape and how we navigate that.
Yeah. So here in the United States, what kind of form of government are we? True. Constitutional republic is what we actually are. And so whenever anybody asks me what privacy is, it's up to how have those people we've elected defined it? What have they put into law to say this is what privacy is? And then everything that comes from that are things that you do to either protect those rights that we establish in law, or there are obligations put on your entities, on government, to make sure we don't somehow infringe on those rights. So really and what that causes is a very complex regulatory framework, not just worldwide, but here in the United States. What is coming is it's a tsunami, in that every state is going to have their own consumer privacy laws. There's no indication yet that there's going to be some national law, but even if there's a big national law regarding consumer privacy, you're likely going to have state authorities over privacy, local attorney general enforcement of privacy and levying fines. And then I think it's important to consider for state governments, who many of you probably have government agencies, has some of your biggest customers. We spend in Utah hundreds of millions of dollars a year on IT, and we work with the biggest and smallest companies, and you're processing citizen data. So you don't have to just comply with consumer privacy, but you have to comply with the state government privacy laws, whatever those end up being as well. So I think one of the important things to just watch is what does every state do? How do they define what privacy is? How does it govern what your company has to do? What are the thresholds? In Utah, our consumer privacy law is only applicable if you generate $25 million a year in revenue and then meet some other threshold mechanisms. And that's not necessarily a good thing, because that means other companies are left wondering, what do I have to do? I don't have a regulatory framework to work within. And it's only getting more complex. So to bring it all, I guess, round back, it's privacy is what the elected officials say it is, and hopefully we can get some uniform definitions across the nation. And then what you do obligation-wise are you do specific things to protect those rights, and those rights are essentially what they establish in code: right to access, right to deletion, right to restrict. It's whatever each state says. So I don't envy any of you, because this is going to take a decade to work out, and it's very complex.
Thanks so much. Tyson, we'll go to you next on the next question here, but I want to add one thought on this topic from our own observation. What we just to confirm how complex this landscape is already, even before all this new legislation has landed, is when you consider the case of Sephora. Now, I know we've all heard about Sephora. We talk about Sephora a lot, but Sephora is a situation where you have a company that's headquartered in, do you know? Paris, right? Paris, France. And they were fined by the U.S. state of California. And how is that possible? Well, it's possible because there are California residents who are engaging in business with Sephora, a France company, who then the AG of California decides that they are not compliant. I mean, talk about complexity. So how many jurisdictions are we talking about? It could be hundreds, that you have to know. So, and Heather's nodding because this is exactly your life. Okay, Tyson, question for you. There are a lot of different people here. Tyson has the benefit of being exposed to lots of different perspectives, going into different businesses, seeing different organizational structures, seeing different processes. Talk to us from the perspective of someone who would advise someone in marketing or someone in web analytics or web governance on what we need to know about privacy and compliance. What do I need to know about data privacy? Give us the answer in like 3 words or
one or
less.
two sentences, right? Okay. What I think you said before, Dave, is important. Is that privacy is really everybody's responsibility, because frankly, now this is me putting on hat from years ago. Marketers would have been kind of my dream target, because typically, traditionally, don't think of privacy and compliance as your responsibility, and yet you're collecting a lot of information that you're not aware about, and you're not aware of, and that has significant implications on your company. And so you would be a prime target for somebody like me. If I wanted to gather information on your company, you're the first place I go, because you're not thinking anything about it. So what should you be thinking about it now going forward is that you should be thinking about, one, really in your span of responsibilities, how much information are you gathering? How much information do you actually need to gather that's necessary for your job? And then how long are you holding on to it? Those are probably the primary questions that you should be asking yourself. But the second set of questions you should be asking is, who should you partner with within your company? Who do you need to be informing within your company? Who should you be letting know what you're collecting, why you're collecting it, and how long you're holding on to it? And typically, that would be your chief privacy officer, maybe a chief risk officer, somebody along those lines in governance and compliance, where you're talking to them, or you're having a conversation with them about everything that you're gathering. Because frankly, just like you're not thinking about what type of really you're not thinking about kind of the implications of some of the information you're gathering, nobody else understands what you have. Nobody understands the treasure trove of information that you have and how it could negatively impact the company, because they don't think of marketers when they're thinking of sensitive information that the company is collecting. And so you need to be the one to proactively go out and actually initiate the conversations and speak with them, so that together you can come to an understanding of basically that. What is it that you're collecting? Why you're collecting it? How you're holding on to it, and the implications that it has for the company.
Heather, I have a question for you. Tyson talked a lot about what we're collecting. Another big question is, what are we giving to other companies? And Heather, you shared a story with us a week or two ago about the developers coming to you and saying, we want to add Facebook login to our application. And that turned into I thought, a very interesting consideration. Would you share a little bit about that?
So when I was with Intermountain Healthcare, I don't know, you guys probably have heard a ton about the news and of metapixels and Facebook information being shared by healthcare companies around the country. Well, about 5 years ago at Intermountain, the question came, do we use Facebook as a login opportunity for patients to be able to log into their My Health? And think about it, like that's all of your sensitive information that would be used. And the developers came to the privacy team, and the privacy officer and I were talking about it, because we're like, how do we move forward with this proactive question? And it was very clear and obvious that that was a really bad idea, because that meant that Facebook would have information about our patients to do all sorts of marketing to, and put crazy amounts of information out into the world that there was not an intended purpose for that, and patients would not really love. And the interesting thing is that here, probably 5 years after that conversation, you're seeing all of these lawsuits happen with all of these healthcare companies that have put Facebook as their login option for their health portals, because they did not properly tell patients that they were sharing the health information with Facebook. And so you think about that, and then you think about the Facebook Pixel issue that came out this year, and that's a new thing. But putting all of these different types of trackers and pixels and cookies and login options, yeah, it's easier for the consumer because it's one less password to remember, but what information is really being shared in that partnership with those companies? And is it really what you want to give to those companies? And what will they really do with it? Because we've seen with Facebook that they've been fined all over the world, not just in the US, but tons of times in Ireland and England and Germany and everywhere, because they don't do what they say they're going to do. And that's the thing with big tech and big social media specifically, is the inappropriate use of data even though they're contracted to do something different. And they put words in their contracts that make loopholes possible. So just be really careful.
Yeah, thanks, Heather. Appreciate that. Very complex landscape. I mean, in some cases, maybe a Facebook login makes sense. In other cases, you're giving up too much that is actually going to get into legal trouble.
Right. You have to know your data and know what, and that goes back to what I was saying earlier about personalizing it, where if you look at it, if this was my data, how would I want it to be used? And then make those business decisions around that, because the likelihood is if you would not be happy with your information being used in that manner, the likelihood is your customers don't either.
Thanks. Chris, next question is for you. So Heather mentioned that this was actually 5 years ago. This question was coming up. I think that's pretty impressive that even 5 years ago, you guys were thinking, where's this information going? What are the privacy implications? Maybe we should go back a little further. Chris, can you talk to us a little bit about the history of data privacy, consumer privacy?
Yeah, I'm going to ask a question. This is rhetorical, but if anybody other than you actually knows the answer, I'd give a prize. You could come and pitch me whatever product your company sells. Open invitation. Which state had the first privacy law around data? Utah. Do you know when it was? All right, we're going to go back farther. And this is the Utah, I have super deep Utah heritage, and I had 3 different grandfathers that were in the territorial legislature when this came about. So the pioneers that came to Utah, they came here to be left alone. Privacy is ultimately about being left alone, choosing what you want to do, and you engage and give people the data, or give people data about you when you choose to. And so the pioneers came here because they weren't being left alone. They couldn't live the way they wanted to live without other people trying to control their lives or having some negative impact. And ultimately, privacy, we're trying to stop negative impacts. Well, the Utah Territorial Legislature in 1862 passed an act for the regulation of secrecy and fidelity of messages sent via telegram. And that's because they were so concerned about the misappropriation and wiretapping related to messages coming or going from the Saints in Utah back to DC and other places. And if you go and look at that act, and I had found this a couple months ago, and so I do really weird research on the weekend around crazy topics, and I came across this, and I was like, there's no way. And I'm reading the original copy that's over at the LDS archives, where it's all in cursive that I can barely read. And it has the original concept of digital signatures. No stealing or misappropriating the information. You have to maintain the secrecy of it. Anybody who gets a copy of it, or the actual telegram operators, they can't sell the data. It was a whole slew of these early concepts that somehow were forgotten. After that, you have the Civil War going on, you have World War I, you have World War II, you have the Korean War. Everybody's so concerned about security, and usually you're balancing privacy with other rights. You have privacy, but you need health, you need safety, you need national security, and it's a balance of those rights. And what happened is, during this whole time of conflict, people kind of forgot about, well, what is privacy? Because we need this security, which means you give up a little bit of privacy. And so we've kind of come full circle now of we're 150 years later. And that's why I say Utah is going to lead out again, because everybody forgot. And all your elected officials, when they heard this, we had no idea that this started in Utah. And they're saying, well, let's bring this back. We want people to choose to live here just like our pioneer ancestors, because they want to be left alone and choose how they want to live their life.
I agree with bringing back telegrams. That was a better time, simpler time. Okay, so Tyson, this next question is for you. Tyson, you have the opportunity in your role to go into lots of different organizations and help them get started. Tell us a little bit about what you see and what are the right techniques to get started in data privacy.
Great question. It's been interesting as a consultant to go in and really, like you're saying, kind of go in and take a look at an organizational structure and then understand why the company has the challenges it has with data privacy. A lot of it comes down to, one, understanding the mission of the company itself, and then how is an organizational structure aligned to support that mission? And then you look at the data. And once you start looking at the data and what their data governance structure looks like, really understanding kind of the governance structure and how that's established, all of that drives down to whether or not they're able to have a good data privacy program. Because if those are out of alignment, then their data privacy program can only be so efficient, because they don't have a governance structure in place, because they don't have an understanding of what they actually collect and what they actually use it for. And so their ability to actually protect data privacy or actually protect data is very, very limited. Even if they think they're very effective and very good at it, they're looking at it from their lens because they haven't analyzed their entire structure. And so we'll go in and they're like, well, no, we know that we keep this data very safe. And that may be true, but the challenge is that they haven't really examined all of the data that they collect, and that they haven't really understood that data across organizations within their company the organizations across their company collect different types of data, and that all feeds up into an overarching, or should roll up into an overarching governance structure. They're looking at it from a very kind of myopic view. And so that's one of the benefits. We're able to go in and really take a look from the top down and from the bottom up to really understand everything that's going on within a company. And so that's one of the suggestions I'd have for you is, in your roles, if your role specifically deals with data privacy, to really look at the alignment of your company from the top, from the strategic level to the governance structure to the organizational structure, and then across departments for what type of data you collect, if you haven't done that already. If you're a marketer, or if your primary responsibility is dealing with marketing data, how do you fit into all of that? How does that organizational structure or should it support you? And how can you support it? And so again, another suggestion, like I said before, is figure out where you fit within that structure and go and talk to people, because I guarantee you, like your chief privacy officer, your chief risk officer will be very, very happy if you come into them and say, here is where I think I fit in, here's what I do, and here's how I think I can help our company mitigate risk and ensure privacy.
What if that turns into a whole bunch of extra work for me?
It absolutely will turn into a whole bunch of extra work for you. But there's going to be work one way or another, because as data laws and data privacy becomes a larger concern, one way or another, it will impact your company. And so you can either be proactive about it, or you can wait and be reactive about it. And that's typically what has happened historically with data privacy, is because it hasn't been at the forefront of most companies' minds, they've pushed it off to the side. And they've been very reactive, and they've waited until fines like Sephora come around, and then they have to act. So why not be a little bit proactive and be at the forefront of this? This gives you an opportunity to really become kind of known for, one, being proactive, and two, for being at the forefront of data privacy within your respective spaces.
Okay, so related to that, businesses love collecting information, and I feel this in engineering specifically, and it's really with nothing but the intention of creating a better user experience, being able to make better decisions. Even simple things like how many people click that button. If we change that button, what's the change management going to be? Are we going to lose revenue? Are we going to have users who fall off of a conversion funnel? These questions they can be critical, but there's also a tension between the user's right to not have all that information collected about them and your need as a business to make informed decisions. Heather, can you talk to us a little bit about how do I navigate that tension of just wanting to, as an engineer, look, I just want all the information you give me, but I also recognize that my users don't want me to have all that information, and we have to respect that. There's balance here. Well, how do we strike it?
Lots of prayer. No, I think the big thing is having a really good relationship with the teams. And I'm really lucky in the sense that I have amazing relationships with our marketing teams and our web analytics teams and our engineering teams and our sales team leadership and all of these teams, so that when things happen, and, we're going through exercises right now to figure out our data discovery, data mapping, making sure it's correct, right? And the only way to do that is to have those relationships, because if I send an email to somebody and say, hey, can you help me with this? And I've been like, you have to do this and you have to do that. And you all know the people that are like that are trying to lay down this huge gauntlet, and you're just like, how do I do my job? And okay, I'm going to ignore you because I have to do this and that doesn't align with the company goals. The big thing is, as privacy professionals, we have to align our strategy with the company strategy and find ways to work together. And the way to work together is to meet, to understand, to connect, and then to negotiate like hell, right? Like if we negotiate really, really well, and I can say, yeah, I can give a little here and can you give a little there, and we come to some compromises, then it becomes a really cool product, and our people are happy because they can finally do the product that they want to do and collect what they need. And our consumers are happy because we're not over collecting things that we don't need. And so when I go to my web team and say, do we have a Facebook pixel on our website? And they say, yes, but we don't need it. I'm like, cool, can you take it down? And they take it down immediately within 5 minutes. That's a good relationship. And it's because I don't ask them to do things above and beyond those necessary things unless it's really important. And so a lot of times from the privacy compliance standpoint, we tend to make everything big because it's the law and it says so, which is still true. But can we do it in a way that is collaborative? And I find that I do, and I tend to get buy-in a lot easier.
Thanks, Heather. Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
I got a message yesterday from a developer. You can imagine CPO, huge departments, 27 employees in the state, and a developer sends me a message in Google Meet saying, "Hey, Chris, we collect this data for somebody that gets services, and we want to add them to an email list. Can we do that?" And I think for me, it highlights something that our governor's planning and budget director said of essentially when it comes to privacy. We've now done a great job of letting everyone know privacy is important. We give them a big list of everything they have to do, and everyone's freaking out of how do I pay to do this now, because we have to do it, and you can't be ignorant of it anymore. So everyone is trying to get staffing and funding for it. And she had highlighted it's privacy is everybody's job. When you're looking from a compliance perspective, if you take it away from saying we don't need this big core team to do everything and to lead it and be the central point, but if you get that right tool set in place and you have training and awareness, you can cut the cost a ton. But it's everybody's job. Whether you're a developer, whether you're in customer service, whether you're in IT, whether you're an analyst or you're a director, everybody just needs to know what's their role and responsibility into it, and make sure leadership has a vision and is giving guidance of those swim lanes so that everyone, what do you have to do? When do you do it? How do you touch this data? And then give people the tools to actually be able to do it efficiently. And then some of the magic starts to happen. And yeah, it's the privacy by design, and it's at the governance level too. It's key. And I know I've seen it in a lot of organizations and private companies and state where people are at, you're down in the weeds and they're saying, hey, you have to do privacy. And it is so hard to do if the organization and leadership hasn't done their part in giving you the tools to succeed, because it is that complex. Those purposes, those uses, the notice, every aspect of it it's so hard to manage.
Thanks, Chris. You can keep that one. Yep, sorry. I already have one. So I want to just share a little anecdote and then lead into a question with it. For about 4 years, I worked on the Amazon Alexa team as a senior engineer. And I was there when GDPR launched. And this sent huge ripples through the company. At the time, this organization was composed of about 500 engineering teams. And when GDPR came out and said, oh, you have to implement there were two important things that really affected us. Number one was the right to be forgotten. If one of your customers shows up and says, delete everything you know about me, you have to do it and prove that you did it. And then the second one was the DSAR request, which is tell me everything you know about me. So a customer could show up and say, tell me everything you know about me. And we had 500 teams had to come together to make that happen. It was very, very hard. these are 500 teams who already have full-time jobs or, a job and a half each. And suddenly these random teams showed up and were like, hey, guess what? There's a new privacy team in town and you have to do this. And it was hard. It was hard to say, all right, I guess we're going to forego our roadmap, or we already had all these commitments that we had made to senior leadership to deliver on things. But people did it. So what do you say, and this is an open question for all three of you, what do you say to people in this audience who say, listen, I was not exactly hired to be a privacy officer. I was hired to do something else. But privacy is everyone's job. I want to help. Also, I don't have time to help. What do I do? How do I manage this?
I'll make the first comment there is some tool set. Handling this manually for a small company, maybe you can do that. But these regulations, they're built in mind that you're already, the regulators assume you have a profile on everybody and that you can easily go and do this. And I think you all probably realized, well, you're not a massive surveillance company that just has a profile on everybody's data in one central place. You had complex issues now you had to do of, hey, an EMPI. How do we identify somebody now across all these systems? And so I'm kind of calling out the regulations here. They almost make the problem worse because now you know where everybody's data is in all your systems and you know more about them and you can connect them in ways that you didn't know before. And that's kind of the double-edged sword of this, is by giving people these rights, that means you also know how to be able to track them and all these different things that were separate purposes and uses and services. Well, you've now brought it all together. So there has to be tools to enable you to identify these individuals, to still separate those purposes and uses of the data, but then to have a standard workflow to implement that process. And so it has to be, you have to have the resources to do it and be able to make the updates or upgrades in your systems to facilitate that. Otherwise, you're going to just send out 100 requests to every department in your organization saying, hey, delete their data and respond. And the public's getting really smart, or attorneys are getting smart. They love these privacy laws, and they're going to come back and they sue and say, hey, we don't think you deleted everything. And if your systems, aren't up to snuff, it's very likely that you probably didn't. You missed something.
That's an understatement. I think I think you're spot on, because even in small companies, you don't know where the data is because of the different teams. And I mean, at Amazon, 500 engineering teams is a lot of engineering teams, but having 3 engineering teams, or 1 engineering team, but 2 analytics teams and 1 marketing team, or 5 marketing teams that do different aspects and all the things, there's no way to know where all the data is, and unless you have a data map and have data discovery going on consistently and have all of the categorization and cataloging going on so that you can fully comprehend the amount of data you have. Because the reality is, you have a salesperson who probably goes onto LinkedIn and downloads 500 names, and you have no idea that that's there unless you have a tool that can scan it. And it's sitting on their desktop, and they're working off of that because they're trying to figure out how to do whatever. And so the big thing is really, like, you have to have a tool to do that. You have to have a tool that does the scanning for you to help you identify those individuals. And, and to your point, the government's definitely made it more difficult in the sense of, not only do I now have to know where it is, but I have 45 days to figure it out and to respond and to delete or to give them a copy or whatever else, which, again, from the consumer side, love that. But 45 days is not very easy to do when everybody else has other priorities. And so when you have a tool, it makes it a lot simpler. Yes, you still have to rely on other teams to do some of the work because privacy professionals don't know how to go in and delete data. I mean, we can delete fields out of a Salesforce form, but I don't want to be in charge of that. I don't want to delete any. My team does not do the deleting. But I do think also working with data governance teams, because those teams are the ones that govern data. They are a huge help and a huge partner with the privacy teams. And then if there's any senior executives in the room, this is the message. Please make budget for your privacy and compliance teams, because having 2 people or 3 people on your team, on your privacy team, is not sufficient with all of the laws coming. We have 7 that are currently there, and more, well, probably 9 now. Yeah, 9 and more are coming. There's a lot. California passed it, and then everybody followed. And so,
And that's just the U.S., right?
and that's just US. Yeah, that's not India. That's not China. That's not the EU. Plus, the EU has, each of their countries have their own specific laws that are required. I mean, it's a hot mess. So it's much easier if you have a tool that tells you where your data is and what you have and what you're doing with it.
And from a strategic level, for the senior executives here, those who have kind of sway, what we've seen over the past 10 years is a shift, and specifically over the past 5 years is a shift for companies at a strategic level to actually, include this idea of privacy, transparency, trust into their overall strategic push to the market. And also from a consumer standpoint, we're seeing that be demanded more and more from the companies they interact with. That there is an assurance from these companies that their data is being respected, that it's secure, and that they have the ability to opt in or out. And so from a strategic level, if you're looking at, okay, it's easy to say, hey, go get a tool and increase your compliance team. It's kind of tough to say when you don't have that senior level top down ability to make changes within your organization. So what I'd say is from those, for those of you who maybe feel like you're in that position, or for those of you who are in a position to make a change from the top down, look at it from a strategic level. If data privacy really is being pushed more and more to the forefront of the consumer's mind, as being demanded more and more, which it is, then get ahead of that by pushing security, privacy, trust, transparency as part of your brand image. And if you push it as part of your brand image, you will be at the forefront of this wave that is coming, and that I've seen across industries. Be at the forefront of that. You will be trusted, and you'll actually see what we've seen. I can't make guarantees for you, but what I have seen is the companies that have engaged in that type of initiatives within their own companies have seen obviously the initial downturn for a little bit, but then typically there's a groundswell once consumers actually feel more secure with that company, and so make it part of your brand.
Go ahead.
We just actually rolled out a project last week, and that goes to increase security for our providers. And one of the first pieces of feedback we got from providers was, you should use this as part of your branding, and because you're in top of the game in this field. And so being proactive is a huge thing, and people really appreciate it. And if you use that as marketing, because it's always been like privacy is a cost center, but really it's not. We have plenty of things going on that help make things better for the consumer, and it goes to brand. And so if you do things, people will appreciate it, and they appreciate the proactivity. One of the questions when we first initiated our thing was there a security breach? And the answer was no, we're just trying to do the right thing. And it felt so good to have that be the answer rather than, we have to make the change. And the other thing that I would say is, this is not 10 years ago. You always hear the people that say, we've been doing this forever and we've never gotten in trouble. Well, times are changing, and you will. And so I would say be very proactive where you can.
Absolutely.
Tyson, you mentioned transparency and trust, and this is where private and private sector and public meet. But we just had a big RFP at the state for what's called verifiable credentials. Verifiable credentials if you're not familiar, it's a big thing that's coming. This is how you do digital identity. You identify people. When verifiable credentials are figured out, there's never going to be any logins again. The government already says who is somebody. And if they've issued a digital credential, those people, you're going to trust them to log into websites because that's the ultimate identity. Government controls identity. Well, I say transparency and trust because we put out this RFP. That's our process. And we're doing a pilot. We got legislation last session. And the core aspect of verifiable credentials is you have to have transparency and trust. Nobody wants the government knowing everywhere you use your digital ID. So Utah is taking a different stance. But in this RFP process, this is the first time this has happened I've seen, but a big part of our scoring for these private companies applying was we said, explain to us how your solution or what you're going to build, everyone's building new stuff, how does it provide transparency of what the government and public entities know when you use your credential? And then how are you building trust in terms of privacy? So we want your features to help us build that trust, and we're going to score in these RFP processes with a big portion of those companies. You may have a subpar product, but if it is better on privacy and building trust, because you already know government doesn't pick, or pay the most or pick the best products, but we will pick what establishes trust and transparency so the public knows there's privacy. And you are going to see that in this next decade where everyone's pushing that. It's not so much about the feature set, but it's going to be about, are you establishing trust? Because there's a lot of mistrust right now.
Okay, I'm looking out to the audience for this next question. I'm looking for like some nods or some head shakes on this, but do you feel like, yeah, I've got the resources I need to play my role in data privacy and compliance? Like, yeah, yes, no, yeah. Okay, I'm seeing a mix. The next question I wanted to ask this group then is, what are the key selling points when you are going to your leadership to ask for more resources or more budget? How do you really convince them? Heather, I think you've given some good ideas already. It's great for brand, great for marketing, but like real, if possible, concrete, sometimes we say, well, just go list all the companies that have been sued and ask if they want to be on the list. I don't know, like, is that an option? What do we say? What can we in this room say to our senior leadership to get buy-in to allocate more budget and resources to this problem so that you're not just doing this off the side of your desk in your spare time and weekends?
I think there's a lot of things that you can do. I think it's going to be a tough and within two minute answer to start delving down into that. But I'm going to make a pitch for one of the people out here and the presentation I know she's giving later, Sam. Go to hers. If you want to know how to actually quantify an ROI around this and leverage that to get more of a budget, go to her presentation. I'm not
going to raise your hand, Sam. So
yeah,
okay,
hers. So we met last year at Edge, and what she has been able to do to be able to show an ROI on data privacy is pretty fantastic. And being able to show that ROI to your company, it's not just all of a sudden, like you were saying before, it's not as a cost center any longer, but one, now you're making it a part of the brand and you can actually show how to create an ROI off of it. I'm not going to do it justice, but I will say, go to her presentation. She will. So sorry, Sam, no pressure.
Okay, Sam, I'm coming to your session. I feel I did really well. I presented to our value committee to kind of give them the ins and outs of our program and the value we bring, because we take a lot off of a lot of people's plates, but we also have a lot, and there's a very small team of us. So taking things off of your plate to put on ours is a huge stretch for us. But I think the big thing is being transparent. So we talk about transparency with our consumers and transparency with in that brand, but are we being transparent inside the company, or are we catering to what people want to hear versus what's really going on? And so I think the big thing is being transparent, not being overly exaggerative, and being able to identify, and you can't boil the whole ocean, right? You have to start one pot at a time. And so what's your highest risk? Identify the highest risks and then start working towards that and start adding. And yes, more risks will come. There will be more fires. The oil will splash. All of it will happen. And you hope it doesn't blow up before you get it done.
My deputy attorney over there is going to give me the side eye when I say some of this. I'm very transparent. In Utah, actually, we got a big executive order on privacy.